How many times do I have to say I'm sorry? Okay, next time I go to a bear's Christmas party, I'm going prepared. Welcome to this episode of Beorn's Tent. For almost 3 years I've been making necklaces out of things like string, beads, poster board, hot glue, leather, and wood. After a little trial and error, they're really fun and easy to make. And they make great Christmas gifts too. Whether it's just making up your own design, or just improvising with some stuff that you've already got at home, no two of my necklaces are exactly the same. Like for example, this is just a keychain of the key to Erebor that I just added a leather cord to. One of my best cords right here is just made up of black string. It's got a metal clasp on it, and what I did here to attach it is I made a little fold here in the string and then wrapped the fold with black thread and covered it with glue to fasten it. There are a lot of different materials that you can work with, like cotton, leather, some black string, and there's all kinds of metal craft chains that I collected for. But I don't use chains to make necklaces anymore because the kind of stuff you get at a craft store is super cheap and it breaks really easy, or just isn't the way it looks, and I just don't trust it, period. So if you want to make necklaces, go for cord, some kind of cord that doesn't snap like chains typically do. But if you really want to use chains for necklaces, go for something made out of aluminum, like a beaded or ball chain or something. Because aluminum is completely waterproof and it doesn't rust, it doesn't decay, anything like that. And this is the first one that I ever made. It's out of 4 layers of poster board and hot glue holding it all together to keep it stiff. I also covered it with glue or polyurethane, I can't remember which, to keep it protected and waterproof. The first thing you want to do when making a necklace is draw it. Make some sketches, draw out your design on paper. Because you want to make sure you know how you want it to look, what materials you want to use, how big you want it to be, that sort of thing. And use a pencil. Don't use a pen or a marker, because odds are the first time you try to draw your design out, it's not going to be the way you want it, and you're going to have to erase it and try again. And if you use a marker or pen, you're just going to end up crossing it out or wasting paper. So how about you save a few trees and not use too much paper and just use a pencil for your sketching. Okay? Makes it a lot easier so you can erase it and try again. Okay, I got the design ready. So, now all I have to do is get to work on making it. Now, the only thing that's a bit annoying about working with cord is that sometimes when you first get it, you know how, like when you go to a store or something and it's wrapped around a strip of cardboard, and then when you try to unwrap it, it just sort of springs back together when you try to pull it out and straighten it. It just sort of stays folded. So, a lot of times when you're working with cord, you kind of want to get as much of that out as possible. So, what I've done here is I've tied up the remaining leather cord that I've used, and the cord that I'm going to be using for this necklace today, which is about 50 inches of waxed cotton cord, and it's less smooth, it's not slippery, so I think if I use the cotton as opposed to the leather, then the knot will hold together better and it won't just come undone by itself. That does happen sometimes, even with the black string that I've used before. So sometimes when I make those, well, majority of the time, almost all the time, is I put some glue on the knot to make sure it won't unravel and just undo itself while you're wearing it. I've left it sitting for some days now just to let it sort of stretch itself. And you know, it's kind of an instinct. Sometimes I get this cord and I think, well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to make a necklace with this at some point. I might as well start stretching it now. Now we get to the really fun stuff. Working with wood. Whenever I make a necklace out of wood, I like to use birch wood because it's a lot softer, it's easier to cut. So, as opposed to other woods like oak and other woods like that are really hard to cut, birch is a lot easier, especially since I'm only using little hand saws for this. I love to polish and waterproof the wooden pendants that I make, but a few times what has happened is if I just cut them, do the design, and then polish it, sometimes it comes out kind of rough and a little bumpy, because when you put polish or like glue or polyurethane, it doesn't just make it smooth. If it's already kind of rough, it just adds on to that. So what I highly suggest doing before cutting it out is to sand it. You can use just a strip of sandpaper, but what I love to use is the sander. This is the sander itself, and this hose goes to a compressor which pumps air into it. And a lot of times it's really hard to get the hose attached, and that's because the compressor may have just been used and there's still air in it, so there's a lot of pressure inside, but it hasn't been used for a while. So what you do is you slide this back and push it in and let it go, and it's basically locked in place. What you do is you peel off this little sticker that's on the back of the sandpaper and then attach it to the machine. But sometimes it's a little tricky to get the sticker off. Come on. Ah, here we go. I just rinsed it with water in the sink after sanding it to get all the excess sand and dust off. So as soon as that dries out, we'll be able to keep working on it. Before you can even think about cutting, you have to measure it. Figure out just how big you want it to be. And as you're measuring, make sure you have a really hard, straight ruler. Because one thing that happens a lot when you're using a ruler like this is sometimes, or if it's an old ruler, there can be some little chips and dents and cracks in the side, and if you're doing a pencil mark down the wood, it can sort of set you off crooked if there's a dent in there. So whichever side you're using to pencil a straight line, just make sure it is straight and smooth. You can even make a little pencil mark on both ends of the wood. So that way, when you connect it with the ruler, you can be sure that it is completely straight and that it's exactly the same width. It's a good idea to, before you start cutting, just put a clamp on it and make sure it's tight. so this way it won't move while you're cutting. And plus it's a good idea to cut on something that you don't mind getting a little scratched up. So like this wooden workbench, for example, has seen a lot of wear and tear, so if I just make a few scratches at the edge, it's not gonna be a problem. When you're trying to cut through wood, the smaller the teeth on a saw, then the better job you'll do. Rather than get a really big jagged one with huge teeth like this is meant for sheetrock, whereas this is better for wood. So just remember, the smaller the teeth, the better. Sometimes it helps to put a clamp on both sides of the board. There we go. Bring it out just a little more. And then I can get the remainders, the few splinters that are holding it together. There we go. Now the next step is to drill a hole in for the cord, and you want to do this before anything else, like putting the design on, because sometimes whatever design you have, it can take up a majority of the wood, and if it's just a little too big, you might end up drilling right through it, right through part of the picture or word or symbol or whatever. So you want to drill the hole first, so then you know just how big or how long to make the picture on it. This is the kind of drill that I like to use. You put a good sized drill bit in here, and then you turn this until it clicks. And make sure it's clamped, just like when you're sanding it. Okay, make sure it's at a good spot. And don't do it too fast, just take it kind of slow. Yes. Pencil out your design on the wood for the same reason you want to just use a pencil when you're sketching, because this way if you mess up, like I just did there, you can easily take it back and try again. After you've inked the design in, let it sit for a while, let the ink dry before you put the polish on, because otherwise it can smear. So just let it sit, let it soak into the wood. I recommend using polyurethane instead of glue for doing this sort of thing. Like, I've done it before with, again, some trial and error. And what I figured out, which should be pretty obvious, is that glue is still glue. So if you cover something with it and add an extra coat or something, if you have it pressed against something for a while or something, it'll stick. I mean, it won't literally be stuck, but it'll just be kind of sticky. So I wouldn't recommend using glue. Just use polyurethane, which is actually meant for this sort of thing. Well, urethane tends to be kind of runny and very thin in terms of liquid. So you want to make sure that you have a small brush. See, there we go. So you still want to spread it around, but you don't want to have a big glob of it on your brush when you're trying to apply it, because otherwise you will have too much, and then there may just be bubbles or just big bumps of this stuff on the wood, and they will dry like that. So you don't want that. You want it to be as smooth and clear as possible. hold the little piece of wood while you're polishing it, odds are you'll get some on your fingers. So either wear gloves or be prepared to wash your hands immediately, because if it dries, it's really hard to get off. You have to scrub it off really hard. And obviously we can't leave this open. We need to wait for these to dry. So you have to close it with a hammer, because you don't want air getting in. You have to make sure it stays shut. And rest something heavy on top like this hammer, or a different can. Alright, and while we're waiting for the polish to dry downstairs, how about we get some other stuff done, like the cord? Okay, so now we've got the cord straightened enough, and now we just gotta measure it to a good length. Now, I'm not putting a clasp on this one, so it has to be big enough so that it can fit over somebody's head. And usually when I make these, the best length is about 30 inches to cut, because the knot that forms, or the knot that closes it, should I say, is going to take up a few inches. Okay, this feels dry enough. Now I just got to add the layer to the other side and let that dry overnight. Because it takes a while, like a couple hours to dry, but it's pretty late at night now, so after adding the layer to the other side, I'll wait until morning and do the rest tomorrow. Oh, blood. I didn't rinse the brush. Okay, yeah, this is something else you need to keep in mind when you're doing this. Make sure you rinse your brush right away, because otherwise it will also get hard and sticky. Guy must be getting a lot of exercise. You know the messenger bear from my first video? Well, this is his son, Arg Jr. But I call him Milky because he goes around stealing milk. Cows, goats, market, pretty much anywhere you can get milk. I don't know how he manages to milk a goat or a cow without cutting up the udder. It's crazy. Took all day, but finally got the layers for the wooden tag done. It's finally smooth enough. After more than an entire day, this necklace is completely finished. I hope you enjoyed this, and Merry Christmas from Beorn's tent. Merry Christmas, Milky. You're welcome. Come on over here, give me a hug. Oh, come on, get over here, you big fuzzball. I'm not taking no for an answer. Come on, get over here. Hello. And they're really fun and really easy to make once you know how. Now all I gotta do is make it. I'm gonna get to work on it. But it does help to actually have a sharp drill bit. And not a blunt one. Ugh. Oh, I can see light through the other side. Best thing to do is put it on its side. gosh, how does this guy tolerate letting himself get covered in snow? Yeah, the bear pacing around my house right now, he's not pacing if he's letting himself get covered in snow. And guessing dry enough. Well, it'll probably be drier in a few minutes, but right now it's dry enough.